like to welcome everyone out to this afternoon's Planning and Zoning meeting. We'd like to remind you to please silence your phones, put them in airplane mode or vibrate, whatever you'd like to do, but so that they don't disturb the meeting. We'd also like you to remember courtesy, that everyone's opinion is just as important as everybody else's, so there's no right or wrong, and we'd like everyone to be courteous to each other. We also want to remind those that came here for, let me remember which one it is, the Fry's fueling station. That will be continued to June 18th. That is Z14-025. And it will be on the consent agenda. So unless...
It will be continued if we vote yes on it,
yes,
if it stays on the consent agenda.
Yes.
But anybody in the audience can pull that off, correct?
Yes. Also, you'll hear in the video that's going to be presented, if you wish to speak to any case, please fill out a blue card immediately. Because some of these cases, majority, are going to be on the consent agenda, and once we have voted on them and they're approved, that's the end of public comment, and they will go forward to either City Council or other places that they need to. All right, if we could have our engineers run the video, please.
Welcome to the City of Mesa Planning and Zoning Board meeting. We appreciate your interest in the future development of our community and welcome your comments. At this time, we ask you to turn off or select the vibrate option on your mobile devices. Today's agenda includes a consent agenda. These items will be read into the record and acted on in one motion. If you would like to speak on any of these items, please fill out a blue card located in the back of the room and bring it to the front. The items will then be removed from the consent agenda and voted on individually. Each case will be introduced by city staff, then the applicant, followed by public comments. The Planning and Zoning Board makes recommendations to the City Council and votes on each case. City Council meetings are held twice a month at 5:45 p.m. in the council chambers. Visit mesaaz.gov to view their meeting schedule. All planning and zoning meetings are broadcast live and rebroadcast on Mesa Channel 11. To view the programming schedule, visit mesachannel11.com.
All right, our first order of business is to consider the minutes from the April 15th and April 16th, 2004 study sessions and regular hearing, and the April 30th, 2014. I understand that we have some absences, so we'll need to break these up.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll need to abstain from the April 15th study session.
Okay. Okay. So I need a motion for the April 15th study session, and then a motion for the regular meeting and the special hearing on April 30th.
Then I motion that we approve the April 15th study session.
Meetings.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, please cast your votes. Minutes passed unanimously with Mr. DeBella.
I didn't even press the button. Still can't get.
I think it'll be on the record. Okay, do we have a motion for the other two meetings?
I'll move for approval of the minutes of those other two meetings.
April 16th and April 30th. Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, please cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, so that's out of the way. Thank you. Now we're ready for the consent agenda. Are there any blue cards that need to come forward at this time? Okay. I see people writing, but I don't know if they're filling out the cards or not.
Here comes one.
Okay, last call for blue cards. One more coming?
That's it.
This one right here. That's number 3 here.
Okay, that's on.
The first consent.
Okay. Any other blue cards? Okay. Oh, one. There we go. All right. I have Mr. Winkle. Which project is or case is your card for?
The general plan.
Okay, general plan.
Okay.
All right, we got two general plans, and we do have one for 014, or Z14-029.
Is that companion with 3.5? No, we're already off.
Excuse me, Suzanne?
Is that companion with 3.5?
They're not asking for 3.5 to come off. Do they both need to come off?
They're companion pieces. Okay.
No?
No.
Okay, so it's just item E3 is what you're asking on that one? Correct. To be pulled off. Okay.
All right. Ms. Johnson has graciously accepted the opportunity to read the consent agenda.
Chairman Carter?
Yes.
I will be recusing myself from this consent agenda for abundance of caution we own some property near some of these projects.
All right, thank you, Ms. Coombs. All right, Suzanne?
Okay, the first item, do I have the mic on? Can you hear it?
Yes, if the last button is lit.
There.
There you go.
Okay, D1, Z14, 15, District 6, the 10,400 to 10,500 blocks of East Elliott Road, south side, located south of Elliott Road and west of Signal Butte, 85 acres. Recommendation is approval with conditions. D2, which is Z1424 in District 3, 1821 South Country Club Drive, located on the east side of Country Club Drive, north of Baseline Road. Approval with conditions. Z1425, 2041 North Record Road, located north of McKellips on the east side of Record Road, continuance to the June 18th, 2014 meeting. D4 is Z1430 in District 6, the 4,400 to 5,200 blocks of South Ellsworth Road, east side, located east of Ellsworth Road and north of Ray Road. Approval with conditions. D5 is Z1433 in District 6, the 4,700 block of South Ellsworth Road, located east of Ellsworth Road and north of Ray Road. Approval with conditions. E1, case Z1426, 610 West Jerome Avenue. Approval with conditions. G1, it's the Eastmark Grand Canyon University campus.
You missed E2, Suzanne.
E2?
14-035.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Z1435, 1008, 1058, 1060, 1102 West McClellan Road. Approval with conditions. Then on to G1, Eastmark Grand Canyon University preliminary plat. Approval with conditions. Eastmark parcel 7-51 District 6, 4816 South Eastmark Parkway plat. Approval with conditions. And G3 Riverview Village in District 1.
The Riverview needs to come off.
That one is a
because
companion then also.
29.
Okay, then I'm done.
All right. That is our consent agenda. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve as read into the record.
All right, do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, please cast your votes. A passes unanimously with Ms. Combs abstaining. Now we have one other consent agenda, which will be items F1 and F2. And Mr. DeBella, I believe you have a conflict of interest.
Mr. Chairman, I'll need to abstain from those two cases.
All right, Ms. Combs, would you read those, please?
F1 is a GP minor 14-007 in District 6. It's the 4,400 to 4,700 blocks of South Power Road, located on the southeast corner of Power and Warner Road. And this is a minor general plan amendment. And the staff recommendation is continuance to the August 20th, 2014 meeting. And the next item is F2, Z14-27, District 6, at the same address, 4,400 to 4,700 blocks of South Power Road. And this is a rezone. And the recommendation is a continuance to the August 20th, 2014 meeting.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Coombs. Do I hear a motion on our second consent agenda?
Make a motion to approve the second consent agenda.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, please cast your votes. Passes unanimously with Mr. DeBella abstaining. All right, if your case was on any of those just approved, you're free to go. They have gotten out of jail free and ready to move to the next level. Okay. With that, our first order of business will be to hear case number Z14-029, which is the 1008, 1058, 1060, and 1102 of West McClellan, and its companion case, Riverview Village, District 1, on the preliminary plat. We'd like to hear a short synopsis by staff, if they would please, and then have our applicant give us a short presentation, and if there's any public comment, we would like to hear from them, and then applicant can rebuttal. So, staff, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. This is Z14029. It's a request for 13 acres to be rezoned from RS43 to RSL 4.5 with a PAD overlay. It's located at east of Alma School Road and north of McClellan. It's for a 73-lot, small lot residential subdivision with a density of 5.7 dwelling units per acre. It's a traditional design with a conventional product. It is in conformance with the general plan. The only stipulation the applicant is now concerned with is stipulation number 4 in the staff report, in which staff is asking for 6 of the lots, 13 through 18, to be widened because those lots are less deep. They're actually 90 feet deep as opposed to the 100 feet deep, and they are asking for a reduction in the setbacks on those houses. So they would have a 10-foot setback on the single-story homes and a 15-foot setback on two-story homes, as well as the patio could encroach up to 7 feet from the rear property line. So just to give those future property owners a little more room in their homes, we've asked for those 6 lots to be widened an additional 5 feet to give that additional space. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
That was stipulation
number 4.
Okay. All right. Mr. Gilbert, we haven't seen you forever.
You sound rather pleased that you have not. For your record, my name is Paul Gilbert, 701 North 44th Street, Phoenix. I'm here with my own Vanna White to help me with the presentation today. This is a very simple case. There are a long list of stipulations. This case reminds me of the phrase, a death by 1,000 small cuts. I'm happy to report, though, we have agreed to all of the stipulations except one. So we stand before you today in the posture of staff support and agreeing to all the stipulations. The only stipulation that caused us to remove this from the consent agenda is stipulation number 4. The staff is requesting that we lose 1 lot. We are adamantly opposed to losing 1 more lot. Now, the area where the staff wants us to remove the lot is in the southeast corner. So we are asking to keep the lots as shown. Why? First of all, we have met with the neighbors in 2 neighborhood meetings. We had quite a few neighbors at our first meeting and a decent crowd at our second meeting. I will tell you, and although I'm maybe known for a bit of exaggeration and naivete when it comes to analyzing neighborhoods, this neighborhood is in support of this case. In fact, one neighbor was so concerned, he said, I don't know if I want to support this case because the homes you're putting in are so much nicer than what we have in my neighborhood now. We were successful in prevailing on him not to oppose, incidentally, just for the record. So we stand here with neighborhood support. Secondly, this is an infill piece. It's a difficult piece. We had to assemble six different lots in order to put this together. And even with that, we weren't able to assemble 2 of the lots down here on McClellan. It's an irregular shape piece because it comes and points to the triangle there. And I could go on and on. It's near the freeway. It has some exciting uses on the other side of it, including a massage parlor. Not that I have ever been there, of course, but it's a difficult piece of property. So we came in, we worked with the neighbors, and we've already reduced the number of lots by 5. We started at 78. At the request of the neighbors, we reduced the number of lots. Also at the request of the neighbors and with a little nudging from the staff, we also agreed that we would only put one-story homes along our border here where we were adjacent to homes with a swimming pool. Also, there is a 12-foot alley that runs all along the border here, which is an additional separation from the neighbors. All of those things combined, we think justify not reducing the lots. Now, these lots, the staff would like to be a little wider. One of the staff stipulations is that we agreed to every lot being 45 by 90. We did that. These lots, for the most part, are 45 by 100 in our whole project. We don't want to lose one more lot. Now, focus on this, please, if you will. And I know you told me to be short, Mr. Chairman. I'm moving this up. For me, this is not bad. On the lots that are in question here, these lots 13 through 18, 2 of the lots already have, as it were, additional width. Because, look, they're next to landscaping. So you got the 2 end lots. From a practical point of view, with the additional common area and landscaping, they already have the additional width. Furthermore, lots 16 and 17 here are limited to single story. So we're here with some pretty good arguments, I submit, pardon my presumptiveness here, that we shouldn't lose one more lot. We've lost 5. We are in agreement with all the other stipulations. D.R. Horton is here tonight, and we not only have this in a zoning posture, but in a rare instance, we actually have a builder that's ready to go and build the lots. We've designed this lot pursuant to their program. That's why we struggled a little bit with the rear yard setback. D.R. Horton has agreed to work through that, and so we changed that and we agreed to that stipulation. So we're here with a difficult piece of property, an infill property. We've agreed to that long list of stipulations. We're asking for 1 additional lot. There's no neighborhood opposition. Now, having said that, there's probably someone's going to surface that I don't know about, but to our knowledge, there's no neighborhood opposition. And so we believe we've made a cogent case for your recommendation to the City Council of approval for the number of lots we've requested. That wasn't short, but for me, it was okay.
I am amazed.
Yeah, thank you. Be happy to answer any questions that you...
Board members, any questions for Mr. Gilbert?
Just to, the minimum lot size of 45 foot by 90 is still maintained on those 6 lots, correct?
These lots, yes.
Okay, so it meets the minimum requirement.
It meets the minimum
entire
requirement.
deal.
Yes, it does.
So the only reason for the 5-foot width increase is because of the infringement of the reduction of the rear yard setback.
Correct.
As staff has stated. With that additional width, would you change the size of the home at all? Potentially? I mean, otherwise, with the wider lots, would the homes be any different in size or shape? Or
it will not. It'll be the same home.
Thank you.
Any other comments from Mr. Gilbert?
I just have a quick one for staff because I might have one for him. When you gave us the new list and I match it up to this list, the numbers, maybe it's me, but the numbers don't line up
They're not the same.
at all.
The one in your left hand goes into the booklet under their
Well, I know that.
summary.
But
It
they
has-
don't match up as to the, they don't even coincide. Like 4 on here and 4 on here are different. And it's 7.
It's because this is related to the table only. It has nothing to do with
This.
Right. Those are
Okay.
7
They're 2
items on the
separate
table.
things
I
altogether.
just need to make sure because
was very confusing,
Because the
yeah.
same wording is done. Okay,
Yes.
I'm good.
I apologize. That's Dennis's fault.
I don't think there's any other questions for you, Mr.
Okay,
Gilbert.
fine, thank you.
You could hang around in the front row for a minute.
All right, I shall do so.
Are there any citizens that would like to speak to this case? We received no blue cards. All right, then, staff, could you give us a quick summation of everything and, again, why they should do this 5-foot extra in the lots?
Members of the board, the reason, thank you, Tom. The reason that staff did ask for that is because of the reduction in the rear yard setback that was asked, and staff has agreed to that reduction in the rear yard setback. This is in the RSL 4.5 zoning district, and as directed by the board and as it was originally established, we really didn't want to see deviations in the setbacks. They were really supposed to be adhered to in these RSL districts. And so just as, since it is a PAD, part of that give and take, if we ask for a reduced rear yard setback, then we're asking maybe for a little more space on the side yard that would give that future homeowner a little more space. Plus, it does lessen the impact to the adjacent home or the homeowners, even though there is an alley there.
All right, do we have any questions for staff, board members?
It's true. I mean, I don't disagree per se, but we're only talking about those 6 lots. And it just seems reasonable that they're maintaining all the other existing criteria. I feel okay with not having them conform to increasing the lot width. That's just my opinion.
Mr. Clement?
I'm going to concur with that too, because I know when we spoke the other day, they were actually opposing on two. So I think even the compromise they did make with those setbacks, I think was a reasonable request. And I don't see the impact of one lot. If it's important to their project, it meets the minimum criteria, so I'm comfortable.
All right, thank you. Are there any other comments? If there's no other comments, I'll entertain a motion.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr.
I think he wanted you to.
I'd like to make a motion to approve Z14-029 with the conditions of approval, striking item number 4 in the conditions of approval.
Is there a second?
A second.
Please cast your votes. The case passes unanimously, with stipulation number 4 removed.
Then you've got the preliminary plat, item
Oh,
E3.
okay, I need a motion for the preliminary plat, which is item
3. G3. I move for approval of G3.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, please cast your votes on the preliminary plat. Passes unanimously. That was a surprise. All right.
Thank you.
You know, I have to say that someone who's got a company that's got the guts to develop down in an older neighborhood, got to have kudos for doing such a nice job in the city of Mesa. I appreciate the effort that you all have done in reaching out to the neighbors and doing a fine subdivision.
Thank you.
All right, our next item is the Mesa 2040 general plan to hold a public meeting. John, what a surprise.
Chair, members of the board, as you know, we've been working to review and hopefully approve a new general plan for the city of Mesa. We're at the last of the public hearings we have scheduled for this board this evening. I'm going to make a brief presentation to kind of go over some of the key elements of the plan and where we're at this evening, and then allow you to open up for any public comments that you have at this time. And then after that, we'll move into item 2, which is to actually consider then the plan. So just again, real quick, it's time to update the existing 2025 general plan. We're required to do that periodically. State statutes tell us we need to do that every 10 years. We have also been previously updated the parks plan, currently working on a transportation plan and a transit plan. Also, those don't come before this board, but just so the public's aware that all these things are being worked on. The transit and transportation plans are nearing completion. but we're looking at the general plan tonight. We began this process almost 2 years ago. We've been working to get public input through a variety of means of being out and about at various public meetings and board hearings and so forth, using our website. We know we're going to continue to grow over the next 30 years. We're projecting through information from the Maricopa Association of Governments that will grow by about 170,000 people. A lot of the feedback that we got talked about the need to improve connections and walkability and a sense of place within our community, how we can create a more recognizable city into the future. So the focus of this general plan update became look at how we can put the general back into the general plan to place an emphasis on quality of development, quality of environment, quality of place within the community, provide a more flexible approach than we've had in the past in this use of character areas that we've talked about, and then to keep the document more usable and useful with key goals and policies and strategies, and not getting too bogged down with those. As far as an overall outline of the plan document itself, has a first section that's a brief introduction, section 2, which is I really consider the heart of the plan, about how we go about building this better Mesa to respond to the public's desires and needs for our city. And then section 3, which gets into the supporting services and facilities of the city, and then a section 4 that talks about administration. So section 3, section 2 with the vision includes kind of 5 primary areas of challenges and opportunities we have, things to focus on in the plan and continue to implement the plan with, again, the quality development, how we respond to the changing demographics of the city, the need to consider our public health and how we can improve that as we grow and build, improving the design quality and that sense of place and placemaking in the city, and being more sensitive to our desert environment and developing that in a way that fits that. This includes a list of vision statements for the city. Okay, and then also builds to and ends with these 3 guiding principles that we've been talking about pretty much from the start of the plans. We got the initial public input and looked at what we needed for the city to really focus on, and that's has to do with our neighborhoods, developing and maintaining a variety of great neighborhoods, growing and maintaining stable and diverse jobs, and then providing those rich public spaces and cultural resources that help attract people and retain people in a community. So a lot of things in the plan revolve back to those. So with regard to then Chapter 4 is where we start talking about neighborhoods, and in there we identify some of the key things we think are important that we address as we review development and work with neighborhoods and provide city services so that people want to continue to invest and maintain their neighborhoods. And it works down again to one goal about creating and maintaining a variety of great neighborhoods. Within this chapter, we also talk about housing issues within the city and how we need to meet some of those changing needs of housing for the city. We also talk about redevelopment. We've got a lot of places that are beginning to show their age, some of the older commercial centers and so forth that were built in a very auto style that could redevelop in the future to be more sensitive to their neighborhood. So we'll review some of that, and also historic preservation is included in this chapter. Chapter 5 is where we talk about the jobs and growing and maintaining the diverse and stable jobs. We focus on some key elements for how we can do that with the business climate and providing the educational resources and creating those quality employment centers, working regionally, providing infrastructure. Again, talk about how we can work towards redevelopment and revitalization of some of those commercial centers, because the commercial aspect, the retail aspect is very important to us as a city. And again, one goal about maintaining jobs. Chapter 6 is where we get into the public spaces and cultural resources. And so we talk about some of the things we need to consider as we develop public spaces. And these are a wide variety of spaces that vary from just streets and sidewalks to plazas, both private and public, they may have in larger parks. And then we also, in this chapter, talk about cultural resources and what we need to do to continue to improve those in our city. And those apply to things that are public, the city things, like the MAC and museums and so forth, libraries, as well as some of the private things that go on in the city that are important to our heritage and culture. And then in here we also talk about parks and recreation, the arts center and museums, and talk about libraries. And then the Chapter 7 is where we get into the community character areas. Our current plan is based on land use districts that are very specific and very detailed in how they work. It's brought lots of general plan changes to this body and to the city councils as we have had to adjust those over time. So we're taking a more general approach where we define these 9 character types and talk about them generally in terms of what the character is for those areas. A little bit more specific with some form and guideline standards that talk about what development should look like in those areas, typical uses, and what some of those zoning districts would be that fit with that. This general approach is then supplemented by sub-area plans and neighborhood plans, where we get opportunity to be more specific, such as the Central Main Plan or the West Main Plan, or those things that allow us to look in more detail about what is really needed in a given area and how we can accommodate the growth and development taking place there. This chapter also then has a section that talks about land use, and more specifically, we've included a land use intensity map that will work with the character map to help show where the more intense type activities should happen and where we're trying to target the less intense activities. And then it talks about the growth areas. So here are a couple of those maps. The character area map, see a lot of it's yellow. Those are neighborhoods. Most of Mesa is neighborhoods. We expect it to be neighborhoods into the future. Neighborhoods include single-family and multifamily and parks and schools and churches and small commercial. A lot of things can happen in a neighborhood that create that sense of place and identity to different areas of the city. So we want to facilitate that to happen. And then the others, the reds, are generally commercials. The blues and purples are employment-type areas. It has a rather different feature, and that's the hatched area that runs down Main Street and a couple other main arterial streets, where we either do have or expect to have a higher degree of transit service available, whether it's a light rail or the link or just a consistent bus services that make it possible for people to have a lesser need for vehicles and can rely more on that transit. Those are areas where we want to focus some of the intensity of activity with the more mixed-use type development. So this correlates in with this land use intensity map, and so you can see the darker areas along Main Street, particularly nodes where we think it'll intersect with some of the other transit services, such as the canals, pathways, and where we'll have future north-south bus routes to then make those the prime places for that increased intensity of activity. So then moving from there, we go into Section 3 in the plan, where we talk about some of the city facilities and services that support then the development of the city. Talk about the energy resources, which is primarily the gas and electric services. Chapter 9 gets into the environmental planning, preservation, conservation. So this gets into things for air quality, water quality, the renewables for energy and those types of things, as well as natural habitat protection items. Chapter 10 is the public facilities, and there we show where the different facilities are currently and where we expect some of the police and fire facilities and some other things to be built in the future. 11, public safety, gets into some of that emergency management issues. Chapter 12, transportation. This has come largely from the update of the transportation plan. Chapter 13 is the water resources. Then we move into Section 4, the administration implementation. Chapter 14, financing the mature city. This covers some of the state statute requirements on cost of development, how we can finance and continue to finance the growth and development of our city. Chapter 15, development review, with a more general approach to land use with the character designations. We thought it was important to provide a way that helps people understand how we'll look at development proposals and compare them with the plan so that we can provide recommendations and look at what can be approved. And then 16 with implementation and amendment. This takes all the different policies and strategies in each of the chapters, brings them together, and talks about what departments would be responsible for the different implementations. It also establishes some of the key procedures we use or tools we have, zoning ordinance, subdivision regulations, those things, as well as talk about how we can amend the plan over time and what constitutes a minor amendment and a major amendment into the future. So that's a very quick rundown of a several hundred-page document. And what's in there. The document is available online at our website. Today you could go out there and see the plan that we've called the second draft version, which was available at the end of January and what we've used through the 60-day review process. Then a strike-through version of that based on the comments we'd received to that point, which then became the Plan Advisory Committee approval that they made last week. So you can see all three and kind of be able to track those changes as we've tried to respond to input that we received. As we look at this particular plan and maybe generally how it differs from the current plan, what we think we're maybe hopefully doing better, this more general approach to land use that allows us to focus more on neighborhoods and community than individual uses and how we can build community that way. And the less likelihood then that we think we'll have plan amendments into the future. Staying focused on the three guiding principles. If you look at most of the goals, they all relate back to those guiding principles and how we can build the neighborhoods, create the jobs, and improve our public spaces. And then improving the connection between the sub-area plans and neighborhood plans. Our current plan started the idea of having sub-area plans. We've been developing those over time. It wasn't real clear how they related to each other and how they work together. We've tried to be more clear about that in this plan. And then again, the connection between the land use and transportation, as we've been working both of those plans at the same time, improved how those work together. So in terms of the final process here, with you this evening. Again, we anticipate this being your last public hearing, and maybe you'll be able to take action this evening. We'll see where we go with the public comment that we have. But then we have it scheduled for City Council for public hearing on June 16th, and then they'll be calling the election on July 1 for the November ballot. So Mr. Chairman, that's where we are.
Board members, do you have any immediate questions for Mr. Wesley? If not, we'd like to hear from some of our citizens out there. Let's start with Mr. Richard, I'm going to guess, Petitleon.
That's good. Petitleon, that's good. Thank you very much. Hey, John?
I never would have gotten that.
You never would have. My great-grandfather, it was Petitleon, it's French. He Americanized it, I don't know why. I'd like to speak to the committee about, or the board about the expansion of the airport area. I grew up in Chicago, the southwest corner of O'Hare Airport. My entire life has lived around the expansion and non-expansion and non-proper expansion of O'Hare Airport. When I look at what is currently on the plan by the Airport Commission, the Airport Board, whatever they call that thing, that has got the five members, I'm concerned because though I understand the concern about Spirit and Frontier not being, at least at this point, at the airport with Allegiant, the future of that airport is going to be massive if we plan it properly. It's going to be an absolutely huge cash cow, much larger in the future because of the planning of Superstition Vista in northern Pinal County, as well as this whole area that you guys are developing with Mesa. The opportunity to this be an absolute cash cow is really there. I just don't want to see any aspect of it wasted, given what we've learned at other airports across the country over time. There's a number of things I want to just touch on. All those can be handled another time, but I want to touch on them now so they're on the record, which would be I'm concerned about the lack of expansion or expandability of the terminal. Right now, the current master plan of the terminal only has 60 gates, which is like less than half of what Sky Harbor currently has. And this airport actually has the capability of up to 6 runways, depending on my last point. I'm also concerned about the access to the airport. If you look at the master plan to the terminal area, all of the traffic coming to the airport is dumped onto Ray Road or Hawes Road or Ellsworth. They're coming in side streets. That's the kind of entry you come in if you've ever flown into Love Field in Dallas versus DFW. It's that kind of huge constraint. My major concern, and I want to hurry up on this, is I'm concerned about the lack of additional land that could be acquired or at least zoned properly and held for expansion of the airport. Can we put up that part of the master plan or the general plan that has the colors for the city on it itself? What we'll see is there's an area, I think it's in purple, below the shaded area. Below the shaded area of the airport itself. It's an area that's basically, okay, I think it's purple. You see the area just below it gets to the city border with Queen Creek, below the airport area? That's an area that's basically 3 miles wide and 4,000 feet high north to south. A half mile at 2,600 feet north to south, as well as at 3 miles wide, is land that's currently not protected by the zoning, it appears, on the maps. If the city would do the Airport Commission a favor and grab that land, I understand that for financial reasons maybe we cannot acquire it yet, but at least if we zone that land so it's protected so the city can acquire it in the future, to put as much as 3 runways in that area, 3 runways with proper separation between the runways. We're not talking LAX or San Francisco or LAS or any of the other airports. We're talking significant proper separation between runways. You can put at least 2 and actually at least 3 with 1,000-foot separation between 3 runways, 500 feet on the south side, 500 feet on the north side, with still no incursion or interruption of the 3 existing runways that are there. So I'm just concerned that I understand it's tough with having 300,000 movements a year with just Allegiant to be thinking beyond what could happen beyond 3 runways. Well, I'm telling you, if you lined up the mayor of Chicago or Los Angeles or New York in this room right now and said, well, we could pick up a whole ton of land for 3 more runways in the future, do you think we ought to do it? They would go, are you kidding? Absolutely, of course, especially when you're not taking out neighborhoods or anything other than just farmland. And it is absolutely only farmland. This is the area between the actual datum alignment of Pecos and where Pecos' new alignment is, half mile south of its current alignment, which is a half mile north of Germain Road. So if you can kind of see on the map where that is. So that entire area directly south of the airport between Power Road and Ellsworth, if we could protect that in the future, then at some point maybe something will hit the airport commission and go, gee, we really need to protect that land for the future. You can always sell it in the future at a huge profit if you ever wanted to, if you ever decided it wasn't going to be needed for 4 or 5 or 6 runways. But again, if you ask any of the other big cities, they would say, are you kidding? To have that available land immediately adjacent to the terminal and the cargo areas, it's an absolute no-brainer, I believe. So I'd like to hear your comments on it.
Mr. Wesley, which chapter is the airport conversation in?
Mr. Chairman, Board Member Coons, we have a couple of places where it's touched on. There's not a specific airport chapter in here or discussion. We touch on it within the character area discussion in terms of having the special character area and that area designated for airports. That's what's shown as the blue up there on the map. In Chapter 5, we talk about our different economic activity areas, one of which is the Gateway area, which obviously is connected closely with the airport as the key driver in that particular area for the economic growth. Then the transportation chapter, there is a section on aviation. So those would be 3 places where we do generally touch on it. We've had a phone conversation yesterday, the day before, whichever day that was, about this, and I've kind of been looking at it since then a little bit about if we were to try to address this topic, where would we put it? And it doesn't fit as neatly as we might like in any of the options, but probably if we looked in Chapter 5 with where we talk about the Gateway Economic Activity Area, if there were a sentence added that said something about exploring opportunities to preserve development options around the airport, however we'd say it, that could potentially be worked into that particular section, which is on page
Am I looking at
511.
5.6? Oh, 5.11.
511 of the second draft. I don't have a printout of the latest draft of the page number. It might be a little bit different there, but where it starts that discussion about Gateway on page 511, again, it would be potential that something could be added there that would address this, just again, in terms of a bullet about the importance of protecting that.
And again, I'm not approaching it just from the general plan standpoint. I would really like to hear, on the record from this board and frankly from the city council that we're actually going to protect that, not just, gee, wouldn't it be nice kind of a thing, because gee, wouldn't it be nice, that's gone to the wayside to all these different airports in the areas. But actually, a directive from this or the city council, whatever would be the appropriate body, to say we need to look at actually zoning that to preclude any use, unless we decide different in the future, from any use other than, frankly, runways or cargo expansion at the airport.
Well, I'm sure that's the city council's job.
I think so too. We're just an advisory board. They're the ones that will be actually taking this up in a more meaningful.
But I will say, I think it's a great catch. I mean, it seems like we have not maybe stated, if we're looking at 2040, Gateway is going to be a huge part of any of our future in expansion and commerce and all of it.
Every suburb around O'Hare Airport in Chicago, every suburb could easily be, as far as standard budgets and not frilly stuff, could easily be the entire city budget could be paid for because of cargo operations, landing operations, et cetera, around the city, O'Hare Airport. This could be the same thing. Can you imagine down the line, half or 2/3 of Mesa's budget 20 years from now being paid for just because of direct on-campus use, not even considering the spin-off use that you're protecting the area from, but directly the airport itself could be a huge cash cow. Because I see down the line what will happen is, frankly, I see as a citizen, but because of my urban planning and architectural background and dealing with this very issue of land protection, I see, frankly, Sky Harbor as not being the primary airport down the line. I see, because of the expansion and the sprawl, and I mean that in a good way, of the Phoenix metro area, I see Gateway and something towards maybe Buckeye or Surprise out there being a future runway, a future airport out in that area. This is going to be a gargantuan cash cow if we play it correctly. And to simply say, oh, well, we didn't spend the time to just protect that land, we could have doubled the capacity of the airport. Okay? Because they've already cut back on the plans. If you've ever noticed, if you know anything about the plans for Sky Harbor, they had an entire new, what was going to be called Terminal A, the same size as the fully built out Terminal 3 Goldwater Terminal right now. Okay, they were going to have 8 concourses on the east, which they have 7 now. Terminal 2, which would be B, with 2 concourses and 8 more in the east. They've now tripped that down from 8 concourses down to 4, and they've now are very dubious, because I've talked to people in the planning department with the city, they're now very dubious about that even happening. So what they're doing is they're kind of taking out the south tier in Terminal 2, and they're going to expand that tier, and that might be all they get, even with the 4th runway, and they're done. And we have the ability with proper separation, proper lead, to put as many as 6 runways. I could easily show it to John or staff or whatever, how that could be done.
We need to move on to our next people, but appreciate your comments.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.
I am interested in maybe some sentence like you're saying. I'm very interested in protecting that area and making sure we leave it how it needs to be.
Well, the amount of development that's happening, not only in the city of Mesa, but down into the Southeast Valley over, I forget what the big development is going to be, those state lands that are further east, and there will be quite a large drawing area for this. We'd like to hear next from Mr. David Crummey? Close?
Crummey is fine, but thank you for the
French.
whatever they call, what they ever end up calling.
Name and address.
My name is David Crummey. I live at 1339 West 1st Street here in Mesa, and I am just coming to just leave my comments about the general plan and how I think it is a fabulous document. And I really appreciate the work that's been done by staff and boards to inform this document, especially all the other documents that have come in to inform this document. I like saying document. You know, as Mesa, especially around the transit corridor, is moving away from being just a bedroom community, and we are starting to see the connection that jobs and housing and transit have together. And as we start building a community where we can all live, work, learn, and play, a document, the general plan document that gives this guidance for the community moving forward is good as we move to building a better, more connected community. So just wanted to give my thanks, and thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We'd like to hear next from Mr. Ryan Winkle.
Thank you very much. Ryan Winkle, 911 West Jacinto Circle, Mesa, Arizona, 85201. We're speaking as part of the RAIL group, which is Retail, Arts, Innovation, and Livability. You all know that at this point. And the reason we put this group together was we really want to promote quality jobs, variety housing in Mesa, as well as a friendly environment for businesses. What it kind of subsequently became was a learning process of teaching people how to be a voice and how to use the public process, which I would love to thank this board and Mr. Wesley for, because we turned in our comments collectively on Monday. I got a thanks that night, and then today I got a reply of how those comments would be used, and if they wouldn't, some corrections to it. And that's excellent. That's excellent testament to the public process. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Wesley.
All right, thank you very much. We'd like to hear next from Ms. Denise Hesp. Heap?
Heap, yes.
Well, I do apologize. I can't read. Your name and address, please.
I'm Denise Heap. I've lived in Mesa. I live at 1745 West Bentley, and I've lived in Mesa for the past 56 years. My father was a real estate broker for decades, and so I've always been interested in the development of the city. I love the city. But one of the things, there's always been a bit of a lack of respect for diversity. And one of the things I love about this new general plan, and I would like to thank Mr. Wellesley for giving me an opportunity as the chair of the Human Relations Advisory Board, is to be part of it. Because as I sat in the meetings, I learned things about Mesa that I didn't know before. And it hit me at one of the last ones I attended, that Mesa has an opportunity here. And it's an opportunity to be a city that we can all be proud of. And with this general plan, with its inclusion of diversity of not just housing and buildings, but the idea that you include diversity of people and that you become a welcoming community. I think we speak not to a plan, but also to the people who are thinking of moving here, to the companies that are thinking of moving here. And for that, I'm very pleased with the general plan. Didn't go far as I wanted it to. Nothing ever does. But it's a great document. And thank you. And thank you, Mr. Wesley. And our board endorsed it, by the way.
Thank you, Ms. Heap. Our last person that would like to speak to the general plan is Mr. Gastelum. Am I close? Okay, well then. He didn't say if he was in support or opposed to this. Mr. Wesley.
So, board members, again, thank you for the opportunity this evening. As you know, we have received, as we continue to, different ideas and comments about the plan. And so, particularly with regard to a couple of things that have happened over the last week since the Plan Advisory Committee made their recommendation, had a discussion with our new council member, Councilmember Benelli. She had recently read the plan. We also got the comments from Rail the other day that we've reviewed. Appreciate their thoughts and comments. And so based on those, got a list here of, I think it's a total of 10 minor adjustments to the plan that we would like to suggest for you as you do your consideration for inclusion into the final document. And so I'll just go through those here briefly. We have our vision statements that I mentioned earlier. They are contained in Chapter 1, where we go through the executive summary, and then also in Chapter 3 is where we really kind of build to them. It was pointed out that with regard to the downtown area vision statement, that there wasn't anything there about people living downtown, which of course is one of the key things we want to have happen. And so it suggests that we add a phrase in there about that. So that's what this first one does for both those locations on page 1, 3, and 3.5 is to add a variety of living environments as part of that particular statement. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you want me to just run through all these or if you want to talk about them as we go, whichever way you want to do, or I'll keep talking until somebody wants to stop, whichever way.
Do you have a document with these on, or you're just going to tell us what they are?
Showing you what with the red line version here, what the change would be.
We're not seeing that on our screen, but I can do that.
Okay.
Now we are.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. And then the next item is on page 3.2. This is in the section of the plan where we're going through those 5 kind of key qualities that we need to look for with development, one of which was high quality development. And it was pointed out that we've talked a lot in there about kind of the buildings, but we don't mention the importance of the site planning itself. I thought that was a good comment. So I've added this phrase in here about the site planning that relates to and appropriately integrates to the surrounding neighborhood. The next item is on, again, page 3.3. So it's in that section where we're talking about those 5 guiding, or those 5 key fundamental principles. I think this made more sense in my written version of this than it does on the slide, exactly where this goes. But as again, we're talking about the downtown area, and let me get my plan book up here. That'll help. I think this is also in the let's see. Can you remember if this is in the end of the piece on quality development, or I think it's in the piece on changing demographics. But again, it's recognizing that we have this variety of activities and just pointing out a specific location where it might happen. along the light rail. I believe it is in the change demographics as we have those lifestyles of the millennials and the empty nesters that are looking for that more integrated environment. The next one is in Chapter 4, where we're talking about the connectivity and walkability. Suggested that we add this comment here. We talk specifically about the transit corridor, but we know that it's only a quarter-mile wide along the main streets. The walk sheds for those is actually generally considered to be a little bit more bigger, more like a half-mile in width. So this just helps reinforce that idea that we want to make sure that we don't just kind of draw some wall at the edge of that transit district, but we've extended out and make sure those areas adjacent to it are connected on into the transit corridor itself.
So does that become another bullet?
Another bullet,
Under connectivity and walkability?
Right. And it'll probably actually end up over on page 5-6, but it's part of that discussion that starts on 4-5. Just add that as a new bullet at the end.
Does that constrain you by saying within a half mile, or is it easier to say within a reasonable distance?
We could go further. Obviously, we're trying to overall improve the walkability and connectivity in the city, but you get beyond that half mile, and that specific need diminishes quite a bit. But if we're going to focus efforts and energies and resources, it's probably better to look within that area first anyway.
Have a defined area, because otherwise it probably won't happen, and if you don't state some kind of measurement on there.
And then, still in Chapter 4, we've moved to the section where we're in the housing piece and talking about some of the different housing types. There was some concern raised about some discussion about overconcentration for fear it might be viewed, I think, the wrong way. And certainly in the downtown area, along the light rail corridor in particular, we're looking at a concentration of multifamily happening of sorts. Although the type we're looking at there, I think, would be a little bit different than what the concern has been in terms of being a more mixed-use environment, more integrated with the surrounding community. Our concern largely has been some of that area north of Fiesta Mall, where we've got that large area of isolated multifamily projects that don't relate well to each other or to the community around them. So we went ahead and to help understand what the concern has been with overconcentration, just to go and identify the area where the problem has been.
The only thing that comes to mind, John, is are we being too definitive right there? Because I know there's lots of apartments. I used to live over in that ages ago, but they could disappear before 2040. Or the next time we have a plan in there, could it be stated a little more, I want to say generically, than pointing our finger and saying, man, that's a bad area. Look to it for an example of what not to do.
Right. And that's why we hadn't put it in here before. And that's the downside of putting it in here is you start to maybe more specifically place some kind of label on an area.
I mean, you could say the same thing about Main Street on the west side, the preponderance of multifamily housing that's out in that area. I personally think that's kind of demeaning to the Fiesta area, and I don't think it ought to be in there. I think there's some other wording that could be done that would be just as helpful than pointing out an area that says, don't do this. This is awful, bad.
Okay.
With that being said, I do like the bullet on that same slide. Mm-hmm. I like the change.
Yes, I thought that was a very, very good comment to turn that into the positive versus the negative.
I mean, that says it all right there.
Mm-hmm. Can the overconcentration just be put at so many units per an area, like a size? I hate to see this.
That's kind of like for zoning, though.
I know, but this is not very nice.
But how do you say that? Because there are places that you may want to redevelop that have that high density and an overconcentration, we might say today.
Yeah, we talked about this, and it was pointed out in the comments that we got from Rail about it's not, necessarily the concentration as much as it is the way it's built, the form, and how it connects or doesn't connect with the community is a large part of it too, and they both kind of fit together. But when you've got so much of it in one area and the impact it has with such a transient population, all that kind of works together, and so it does get kind of hard to define it. I'm not sure that they've necessarily had to.
I don't find it offensive. I think you're just being, it's an example of what really did occur personally.
We've stated what we think.
Right.
You all are the smart people on this stuff. So go ahead, Vince.
I mean, can't you do it with pictures and maybe take that whole thing out and just have references to areas without
We can try that.
describing it? I mean, more.
Okay.
Sometimes we get caught up in the wordsmithing that we kind of forget about.
Pictures say 1,000 words sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd be
And
more
so
comfortable with that.
maybe when we get there, the board could, suggest that we look at an alternate way of doing this. It's not quite so specific, and then we can work on that change. Okay. Then moving on to page 413, again in this housing area. It was pointed out with regard to first the workforce housing, which is on page 413, as well as the transitional supportive housing. Those, again, could each probably use additional bullet that describe a little bit more some of the setting in which they should go and some of the resources that go with them.
What is workforce housing? Is it a term of art that I don't understand? Because
Well, as you read in there, it has some specific parameters that go with it.
Okay,
Affordable
I'm
housing
looking.
facilitates persons that make 80% or less of the median income, pay no more than 30% of their income for housing.
Say that again, John.
It's affordable housing facility,
right here, it describes the
Persons who make-
term of art.
80% or less of the area median income,
Okay.
and pay no more than 30% of their income for housing. So these are people who, have a good steady job, that it's in retail or it's whatever, which maybe doesn't pay a lot, but they have, they're
So
working.
Why are we adding this? The idea
Well,
is
a lot of
to-
times, sometimes workforce housing is provided specifically, by a group such, Escobedo housing. Some of that new housing there would be, the workforce housing. And so as people look at places to do that, you want to make sure they really consider the neighborhood that they're putting it in. So they haven't put it out someplace, okay, it's great, you've provided some housing, but now, there's no services around there to help the people that live there. They've got to drive to get to whatever they can do. So it ends up maybe being just as expensive or having some other impacts. Other workforce housing is just, housing that's existed and is just part of a neighborhood. So for that's developed specifically as workforce housing, just make sure that the context in which it's placed is thought of, so that the residents who live there will have the other services they need and not again be stuck off someplace where they don't have a community they can be a part of. So that's the first bullet. And the second one, with regard to the transitional and supportive housing, the Lamasitas and some of those things, again, it's very important for those that they really have those transit facilities and some of those other support services with them. So,
I don't know, John, that first one on there sure seems like it's really applicable to every neighborhood, because isn't that the goal?
it is true, and that's one
I
of the
mean,
things.
we all want every neighborhood to have good parks, be close to schools, jobs, shopping. I mean, it's like a generic type of statement. But I do understand what you're trying to say, because say like up in the bowling area, if you have your lower work group, say making under $20 an hour, there is no place for them to live up there without traveling from quite a distance. And so it seems a little on the generic side that we could maybe tighten up a little bit. I don't know how you do that. You guys are the wordsmiths. You're the magic men.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But it does, I mean, because this could be said for every single income
Right.
group.
That's right. And that's, as we toyed with how to write this particular statement, that's why it has the introductory and housing developed specifically as workforce housing. That's one we kind of need to think about a little bit more, that somebody isn't just seeing some great opportunity to build some housing off someplace that really doesn't work and provide that overall environment. Most of the housing, though, that a lot of multifamily housing or some of those others, they're just part of a neighborhood anyway, and those services are going to be there, and they'll cover a lot of that workforce need. So we didn't feel like we needed to address that quite so specifically, because I think you're right, that it is just part of a neighborhood. So this particular one is for when you're specifically doing that or trying to provide that as your target, make sure you do it in an appropriate location.
You guys are being really quiet down there.
I'm going to move on then.
Please.
I think we've got one or two more. So we're into Chapter 5 with the jobs chapter and talking about the different economic activity areas. And there's one that the West Mesa area and the downtown district specifically. It was pointed out in discussion that this can be quite the attraction for employers who are looking for a certain type of employees who want that more active mixed-use environment. And so just to put that positive statement in there when we're describing some of the benefits of this area, that it can be a good attraction for employers. And then on page 6.3, where we're talking about some of our public spaces, a lot of the discussion seems to lead towards the parks and the plazas, those kinds of things. But really, when we look at it, the biggest amount of open space we have in our city are the sidewalks and the streets and so forth. It is an important part of our public spaces. And so just make sure people understand that and don't bypass it as they think about those public spaces and the quality of them. It's talked about a lot in the transportation chapter, but this just kind of helps create that link.
I have to say that when you pull this up, the first thing I thought of was all the streets that are continually torn up or being repaved throughout the city. So what are we talking about in enhancing our public spaces, which include streets and sidewalks? Is that in that other section you just mentioned?
There are a few things in there that describe it a little bit more specifically in Chapter 12.
So what are we saying we want to do, enhance to our streets and sidewalks as well as other public spaces? It looks like it's not quite, the phrase needs a little more specificity, or whatever you say that, in it.
I think the clarification here, though, is just remembering that streets and sidewalks are part of the community open spaces. That's all.
That's all we're saying right here.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. It's where I've chosen to put this is at the very start of that section, as we have the very first lead-in sentence about public spaces. Just remember that those are part of them that need to be thought of.
Works for me.
Okay.
I just see preserve, nurture, and work, repave and repave and repave.
Yeah. And then
trees and other stuff.
Well, be happy for repaving sometimes.
Well, yes, but there does seem to be a whole lot of it.
in conjunction with the discussion we had a minute ago with regard to the airport, I would suggest that on page 512, where we're in the discussion about Mesa Gateway, we have 2 bullet points currently that we could add a third one that says, consider ways to acquire or protect land adjacent to Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport for possible expansion of the airport.
That sounds very nice.
And within the context of this plan and what's available, I think that's probably the best way to approach it. It puts it out there. The airport authority, the city can then, as may be appropriate, and see where to go with that.
Will you read that again?
Okay. Consider ways to acquire or protect land adjacent to Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport for possible expansion of the airport.
Okay.
Okay, come on.
No, I like the idea. I'm just saying, I don't know how you can, in a city plan, bind. There's no way to bind the council to financially do something like this.
That's right.
So.
And again, at this point, this would just say, consider ways. And so they could consider it and just find there is no good way to do it, or they might find ways regulatorily to help do it. That's one of the things that was suggested in terms of the general plan, the sub-area plan, the zoning designations that are there. It could be if somebody has lots of money to start acquiring the property, there's options there that have to be studied.
And what about Falcon Field, right on that same page, 511? Is there anything there? I guess it already says it. Planning efforts will continue to protect the area north and east from residential encroachment, ensure the area remains appropriate.
Right.
It's probably covered.
Right. When you're looking at the January draft, there have been a lot of things that were in your modification language that was sent out, because both airports provided some language.
Have weighed in on it?
Yes.
Yes.
They have.
Okay. You're right. I am looking at the January draft.
So those, along with then the changes you got in the original memo that are what are online for what we're calling the Plan Advisory Committee draft version of the documents, what we have before you this evening for your consideration and recommendation onto the City Council.
All right. Thank you, John. Very well done. I think so much better than the last one. But that's my personal opinion.
The last presentation, or you mean the general plan?
General plan, for your plan. I do have two cards here, board members. One from Larry Tillman that addressed us earlier, and then one from a Mr. Tracy who came in late. Do you wish to hear these individuals?
Yes.
All right. Well, then let's ask if Mr. Tillman would come up again and give us a shortened version.
Just it up as a not for speaking, as a comment only.
Okay. Just comment only? Didn't get that. I don't even see the comment. Oh, the impact and effect?
Do not wish to speak in
Okay.
support.
All right. Mr. Tracy. Would you please state your name and address, please?
My name is Richard Tracy, 2238 South Cottonwood Street in Mesa, Arizona. I've been in Arizona for 43 years. I moved to from Phoenix to Mesa just in time to get involved in the Bailey brake shop issue. And of course, it didn't go the way it should have. And I think of the city if it had gone, because it was a bigger plan than just somebody going from one store to another. Hotels were envisioned. I worked on that. I also worked on the failed effort for the Cardinal Stadium. Did work on Bass Pro. I've been a judge and a lawyer for 60 years, retired now. But I do know that there is no freedom without law. The Bailey brake shop situation was a case of distorting the law. There is a right for the public to have good planning. And it started out back at the time when somebody lived alongside a river and had to share with the other people who might have lived 2 miles away from the river. Our biggest problem is the air. I have COPD. It's an effort to come here. And I'm on oxygen every night. I live too close to the freeway. I beg you to make this a city, because this whole area is not a real city. I've lived in them. I've probably lived in more cities and homes than I have toes and hands and fingers. And we are ruining a gift from God for this community, the sun and the climate. But we lose $1 billion in tourists because some kooks come out with some kind of a plan and spread it across the country. I feel sorry for the people in downtown Scottsdale, because somebody 20 years ago should have said any residence in this particular area has got to be gone in 10 years. because that would be a place for the entertainment center. And there's no doubt in my mind, some couple who's lived next door to a place that's now a bar does not want the music at 2 o'clock in the morning. So let's envision a real city, and at the same time, speak up if something is being done wrong, because, you know, people are being paid to build some of these buildings, and like I commented, you remember there were pots on the freeway? It cost us money, and they weren't necessary. And thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Are there any other comments on the general plan?
Mr. Chairman, I've been on the PAC group from the beginning, and I know staff has put a lot of time and effort into it, and we've heard a lot from a lot of different groups. But I think as we move past this, we're going to kind of be in a little bit of a danger zone in terms of, as City Council calls for the election, and from that point on to election time, it's kind of an area of a piece of time, or an area of time that's going to, if we don't keep up on the promotion of it and garnering information, putting the information out, it's going to go to vote, and no one's really going to know what it's about. And it's really unfortunate if it does not pass.
As in fail in Scottsdale's
Correct.
situation?
So as we can keep the pressure on, keep the information flowing, it was designed to be a living, breathing document. So we've taken it so far, and it's time to move on and hopefully implement it.
Any other comments, board members?
No, I've read this thing backwards, forwards. I've been supportive of this whole document. I was involved in the last general plan amendment, or I guess it was the Growing Smarter campaign, and understood the way the general plan was done at that time, and I like the format of this one. It's open, it gives a lot of opportunity, and it gives a lot of area for growth. So I'm very supportive of it.
I think I've been taken as the one who was opposed to this plan, which I have not been. I have made several comments, and I appreciate Mr. Wesley talking with me about him as a planning and zone member, board member, and also just a citizen who I'm really grateful that I've been on the board during this time. I may not have taken the time to read the document had I not been. I don't know how we keep the focus or the pressure or whatever you're saying, Mr. DeBella, to voters to read it, to understand it, to look at it, to vote for it. So I appreciate all the changes. I appreciate all that have read it, and we keep getting different changes, and it's great. So I do have a couple more changes I'd like, but Mr. Wesley has decided no, we probably shouldn't.
I see. All right, board members, if there are no other comments, then I can give my comments that I echo what Vince and Suzanne and Beth have said. It's been a long road, and I think the result is so far superior over the previous general plan, which I helped work on too. So I think it's a document worthy to govern the city of Mesa for the next bunch of years. So with that, do we have a recommendation for the city council, board members? Or motion for a recommendation? Is that what it is? Well, you would motion that we recommend the general plan move forward to general council with our.
And then as far as the items presented this evening, whether you're for any or all of those to be included in that draft that goes to council.
I'm not having a lot of heartburn over anything I saw tonight.
We still need a motion. Come on, Brave.
Vince, you were on the committee.
Yeah, but I already said my piece with the other group, so I think it'd be appropriate for someone else to do it.
Well, I make a motion then that we
recommend approval.
We recommend approval of the general plan and its condition. And my understanding is that, like you said, it's still a living document. Will there still be some substance in terms of change or modification?
Until the council votes its approval, it still could have
So it's still
modification.
alive, very much
They're-
alive.
Right.
But
They will still, council will still be holding a public hearing where people can come and make their comments and suggestions for modification.
so the motion actually pertains to our support as it
Yes.
sits today, with the idea that it can still be altered. So that is my motion, that we recommend their consideration of the general plan as it currently sits.
Is that with the items that were discussed this evening for modification?
Well, considering that it's still alive and a moving document, the answer would be yes.
Okay.
Is that a sufficient motion? Okay, is there a second?
Does that include the airport statement? Okay.
Yes, definitely the airport statement. I like that.
I'll second that.
All right, board members, please cast your votes. Unanimous. So we appreciate all the efforts that everyone has made, and it has been a long road.
I'm going to kind of miss the presentations on this, don't you think?
I know you will be glued to Channel 11 every planning and zoning meeting up to that point.
We'll start talking about the sign code at every meeting.
You could be on a committee, Beth. All right, if there's no further issues or items, then let's adjourn until June 18th.